Hello and welcome to Cut to Reveal, the show where we talk about editing, filmmaking, and stuff that are interesting to editors, filmmakers.
And us.
My name is Piotr. And ourselves here, we're selfie bastards. So it's Piotr as always, and I'm with my co-host Ricky. How are you today?
I'm good. Just working through some notes on the feature that I'm working on, Prowler. So it's a good day when you can edit.
Of the editor.
The life of the editor. That's right. So things are well. Things are going well. How are you doing?
Doing fine, thank you. Last days of summer, almost like not summer, but like vacation before kids go to school. So trying to enjoy that. But also we're addressing Robert's question today. So Robert, the director you're working with on Prowler, asked us a few questions. Said it would be good if you would address these few things on the podcast. And today we are addressing the first one, which I guess was asked towards me in this case. What's the question, Ricky?
The question is, as we all know, you just directed and edited your short film, Yellow Ticket. And so Robert was more interested in hearing what your perspective as a editor and how that informed you as you directed your first short film.
So I thought about this, not for a long time, but I thought about this. And there are a few places where I think editing experience helped me in a way. And also I heard a lot of directors that have that editing experience, saying them being editors really helps with making decisions on the set and also creating a shot list and stuff like that, right? So I guess the first thing that editing experience helps with is creating a shot list. Basically, what types of shots you need, what size, and what coverage, And this actually leads to this second part right away, which is you sometimes know that you don't need coverage. And, in traditional world, as far as I know at least, and as far as I've been exposed to, very often on set, coverage is super important, and the director basically wants to cover every possible angle, right? Even the DP I worked with, we've mentioned, the much bigger production than Yellow Ticket that he worked on, and yeah, that's pretty much how it went. They were just doing on this side, and so on, and weren't really trying to do anything out of the box, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine sometimes, by the way. I'm not saying that it's a bad approach. And as editors, we really like to have coverage. It's a good thing to have it, right? But I think that with enough experience, it helps to make a decision when it's necessary to have it and when it's good to let go. And there is a moment in Yellow Ticket where I decided to go with a long take, almost like a master shot. It's handheld, it follows the actor, and we were actually supposed to shoot some reactions for this moment as well. But eventually, I decided that the performance of the main actor it's so good that I will not dilute it in a way with reactions at that point anyway. And actually, it made it into the final cut. That's what we did. We didn't dilute it with anything else. Just this moment is just on the teacher. It would be still good, to be honest, to shoot this reaction shot for one reason, because in different moments of the short
Mm-hmm.
there are moments where I found it difficult to find the reactions that I needed at the moment back in the editing room, right? But for that moment specifically, that's what's in the film, and that's what I haven't even questioned for a moment, because the performance at that very moment is so good that I just said we don't need to record reactions over here.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing is that you're aware very often, you're aware of not gonna make it on the set, you're aware of what's not gonna make it into the cut. So if there is a problematic moment, for example, in a given take, you sometimes know that you're good. This section of this take that really matters was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So even though we made this mistake, or there was something imperfect at the beginning of the shot, for example, you know that it's a scrap. So there is that, and I had it a few times actually on the set where someone was like, "Oh, there is that," and I'm like, "No, no, no. That's we do it for like getting the actor in the zone, and it's not gonna be there anyway, right? Because you do have to do like overlaps and stuff like that. For if you want the actor to be at the specific level of emotions at any at given moment." You have to prep him for that very often. So he often starts a little bit earlier, stuff like that, right? And like which parts are gonna make it into the cut and which are not, which are gonna be used from a different perspective, different take, different angle, right? Maybe you don't know something you for sure, but you have like a educated guess, I guess. That's what I would call it. Yeah, and this is also correlated with something that I experienced on the set quite often, which is people noticing like continuity issues in like most minor places.
Okay.
And that's the thing that like a lot of people are like continuity is this thing that you have to put on the pedestal, and because it's so important, it throws audience off if they notice any continuity issues and stuff like that. And that's true to some extent, but also I think that like when you're editing, you're aware of what type of continuity issue is really an issue, and what type of continuity issue is not gonna be noticed because it's not relevant to the story. That object is not like picked up later. It's just there, and like it lays on the table, for example, and no one cares, and no one will never notice, or like there will be one person out of like 10,000 people that will notice, but it's an Easter egg at this point. Like it doesn't matter at all, right?
Yeah.
So I think that you have this sense, this spidey sense in a way of like recognizing which continuity mistake is a mistake that you should address and you should correct, and which one is not really important.
Yeah. Can you get an example of that?
Oh yeah, we had like a few with like a hat of Jeff, the character from Yellow Ticket. It moved on the table, right? And like in one shot it was, I think, like at the edge, at the other it was like more to the center of the table, of the desk. And someone pointed it out, and it was like at the edge of the frame, and like the focus was on Mr. Valentine. And I'm like, it's fine. Like, let's move on. We don't have to correct it, right? You were worried that like that the eye trace is not gonna lead the audience there anyway, unless they stop and like they look for these things, right?
Right.
So you're good. But other times, like there were mistakes, continuity mistakes, where I was like, oh, that's what we did. Oh, he was sitting back at that moment. Okay, thank you. We had like a script supervisor, and she was great. She like really pointed out a lot of things I haven't noticed because of like being focused on the actors, right? Which I would notice for sure in the editing room,
Right.
but because she pointed it out on set, we could fix it, and then I had like the working cut for that, right? So yeah, so it helps to have a person that's focused on this stuff, but also having that kind of like experience in the editing room, I think helps you make an informed decision on which continuity issues are really issues.
How much of the film, when you were shooting, now this kind of goes back to what you had mentioned before about, okay, I know that we've got the part that I want from the scene. Even if everything goes off the rails at the end of the shot, I know that we got what I wanted. In that spirit, how much of the film or how much of it are you editing in your head as you're going along?
I mean, I think that even without editing experience, you do it anyway. You're right. You're kind of like imagining imagining how it's gonna go together and stuff like that, right? So I think I do it all the time, but I think with better practice, the better you become. With more practice, the better you become at it. It was my directorial debut, so I think I potentially could do it better with imagining what goes next, and which angle is gonna be used at this moment and so on. But I was doing it all the time. Like we had a very thoroughly prepared shot list. I prepared it with my DP Mateusz Kanownik. So like the shot list like wasn't had and we didn't do this shot list for coverage. Like, there were moments where obviously we did, like, over the shoulder of this actor, over the shoulder of that actor, and we did like a master with two actors. There were moments like this, but even then, like, we were pretty much sure which moments of these takes are the ones that's gonna end in this framing, and which one is gonna end in a different framing. But in those cases, I guess we were always after perfection in each angle, right? Because you still want to give yourself options in the editing room, that's for sure. But still, like, the shot list, I think, is the first moment when you're imagining the film in your head,
Hmm.
with specific framing, with specific shots from specific points of view. And yeah, and the one that we prepared wasn't done for coverage, but rather to follow what we thought it will convey the emotion best, the angles and the shots and so on, that will convey the emotion, the camera movement as well, right? And that's something that we were very uh
Cognizant of.
yeah, exactly, thank you. Yeah, so there is that. But actually, one thing that I thought I would do better at,
Hmm.
because of my editing experience, is dealing with eyeline and 180-degree rule on the set.
Okay.
Because, like, you notice this stuff all the time when you're editing. Like, you notice it right away. Oh, there is like 180-degree rule broken, right? Okay. Do we deal with it, or do we, like, you know so there is this question all the time in the editing room, and you're very familiar with it, and you notice it right away, like in a fraction of a second, right? But on set, it wasn't so easy for me. And actually, there were a few occasions where, again, my DP, Mateusz Kanownik, was the one to point out that, like, oh, if we're gonna do it this way, because we were like, we had the shot list, but still we were but we would still make changes as we go, as the way and as the day progressed, right? Sometimes to the shots. And yeah, he a few times he had to go like, no, if we do it this way, we broke the eye line from that shot we did like an hour ago. And I'm like, oh, you're right. Oh, okay, I haven't noticed. So, I would notice right away in the editing room, but on the set, not enough experience, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's also a different perspective, I think. Like, you're not looking at something in a frame that's, you know, arbitrarily 1920 by 1080. You're looking at something. You're looking at everything within, like, your peripheral and stuff, and even if you're standing two steps to the left compared to two steps to the right, it's going to be a totally different perspective. So it makes sense that you would need somebody along with you to be like, oh, hey, we got it, we can't do it that way or whatever. With this shot list, did you guys storyboard at all?
No, we just did, like, I did basically storyboard for this final scene. You know what it is, but the culmination basically of the short. That's where I did storyboard, and I actually did even like a temp recording with just myself.
Hmm.
To see how it works. So I did it in this room, and only a few people has seen it. But it's me doing a thing, the culmination of the film, just to see how was the rhythm of it. Really, it wasn't really for framing. It was more like, I would follow the shot list, and try to convey the shots that we're gonna get eventually. But really, the purpose for me of it was to see the rhythm, how it flows, if it's like fast enough, if it basically feels right. That was the goal. For the rest of the film, I didn't feel like we need to. It's not super complicated, CGI stuff like that. It's like, so for the shot, that one shot that is actually a composite, then for this one and the shots that are next to it, I did like a very simple storyboard, and then executed it myself in this room to see how it flows. Yeah.
That's interesting. Because I'm thinking the one time I did storyboards for a film this is 100 years ago now. It was kind of similar in the sense of it was shot in one space. It wasn't like, okay, we're going to different locations or whatever, or even different rooms. And the storyboarding was more, and the person that I was working with, the director, was also a first time director. And I don't think he even went to film school. And but it was kind of like that perspective of like, okay, how are we going to be able to shoot this and figure it out? And we kind of used that, but then also the people that were helping him, the shooters, and whatever the producers were there to also kind of be his eye line. And I think we did the entire film, regardless of how simple the story was and the interaction between two people. Like, there were only two people in this film, but I think it was more of an idea to like create the shot list rather than, okay, we've got something, we've got this set piece or we've got this huge event within the film that we need to figure out how we're going to cut it and how it's going to appear on film and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think the storyboards are helpful, but also I think that, like, probably it might be editing experience as well. That, like, to me, highlights which moments are important to storyboard, because, like, for most, it wouldn't help me in any way. For most moments, and for most of the short film, it wouldn't help me to have these storyboards, but we did prepare a lot. Like, for example, Mateusz, again, my DP, Mateusz Kanownik, he did like top-down views with like relationships of the characters, where they are at any given moment. And before the set, before the production, we met on set together, and we walked it through, basically, like, deciding, okay, this student sits here, this one sits here, once, like, they come from this angle, and I don't know, this teacher stands here at this given moment, and so on. So we decided on all of these things, and then he prepared these like top down views in some kind of software. I'm not really sure which one. We had them printed at the corridor of the school where we were filming, but I think that eventually it was more like, the thing you did before the shoot to prepare, but eventually we would go with the flow. And I haven't noticed Mateusz once approaching that board and, like, reminding himself of what he drew there or something like that. I think we pretty much reacted to, what was happening and the changes that we were making on the set, because we were making some changes as we went, right? I think it's a very natural thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, with that specifically, I think that that's kind of, as you're creating it, obviously he was creating it more than you were, but drawing it out. But that kind of gets imprinted in your mind, and if you're doing it, you're choreographing everything, and it's a dance. And once you know the moves to a certain extent, then you can start experimenting and start working. Okay, we know how this is supposed to go, but let's change it up. And you have the confidence to be like, okay, this is how we're doing it now, and knowing that you're not going to make too big of a mistake, or you can freeform it and freestyle it in a way that gives you that confidence.
Definitely. And I guess, just to, like, to summarize it, I think, like, editing always helps. It's one of those skills that, no matter what you want to do in filmmaking industry, knowing what editing does and how to edit will always inform other areas of filmmaking, I think. And just, I guess, last reference for Yellow Ticket, I have a few people like approaching me and like saying, like, is this gonna work? It was about like a composite shot, right? And I knew I'm gonna mask it and it's gonna be a composite, but people like didn't know what I meant by that. Like, come on, he's not there. How he's what's going on, right? And I'm like, fine, relax, it's gonna work. And I was aware, like, of like what are things that we have to care about so that this composite works. And without that experience, so without me doing this earlier on other projects, I wouldn't be thinking about those things. For example, like, I was putting someone who wasn't there in, basically, right, so to speak. So one thing is like shadows. It will be weird if shadows aren't there, right? So we talked about this with Mati, and the lighting was set up in this way, so it wasn't the problem, right? But, like, again, this was informed by editing experience, like doing this kind of like split screen composite before on different projects. Yeah.
That's what we're always talking about, is how no matter how big or how small your previous project is, it's going to inform the stuff in the future.
Oh yeah.
And I can remember also 100 years ago, my mentor saying that, well, I don't know that he even sent this, but I just remember, because I would shoot a lot of stuff too. And me being an editor, I was, even he confirmed it. He's like, oh yeah, the best shooters are also editors, because they know what they want or they know what they need, or they know what the best shot is going to be, and that really informs everything. And I know, like horror film director George Romero, he was a jack of all trades. Like he edited, he filmed, he knew how everything worked, and he was very, I don't want to say strong, but he believed a lot that as a director, you should know how everything works. And I think he's not the only one that's ever said that.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
even though that he's not doing all of those things, because he has an understanding of how that works, then that informs him as a director, as an editor, within filmmaking in general. And I think that that's very important. And we've talked about this before. I think it was our very first, or one of our very first episodes was about synergy and how being an editor, being a shooter, like those things come hand in hand. Being a writer informs you as an editor. And when I say these things, or when we talk about this stuff, it's not specifically like, oh, you're an editor, and so you have to be an advanced editor, or as a director, you have to be the best director, or you have to know all the lenses about everything. Like that stuff is important for sure. But if you don't know, like, if you're talking to as a director, if you're talking to your DP, and you're like, use the wide angle lens or use the one that does this, and you're just speaking of it, phonetically. Yeah, you're speaking of phonetically rather than like use the 120 or use the 25. Like you getting that across, you have the understanding of it, and because you have this relationship with them, they understand what you're talking about. So, somebody from the outside might be like, this guy doesn't even know what the fucking lenses are, and they might put their nose up at it. But you, as the director or as the editor, know exactly what you're talking about. So whatever they're talking about, they're just fucking idiots. It's just like, you know what I mean? It's like it isn't about. It's about the understanding of the equipment and what you're doing and with it that is most important, rather than knowing the technical aspects of it or being a complete expert.
I recalled actually when you were talking about this, Pantelis, the director of Cold Little Bird, a short film I edited a few years back, and to him, what was important was that thanks to working with me, he understood what can be done, what's possible, and that's also important because like if you have that editing experience, you know that you can, if you have like a stand, if you have a still camera, you can try to join separate takes together and like use performance of this actor from this take and performance of this actor from that take, right? And another thing that you can do, like morph cuts sometimes, like all of these different tricks that we have in our playbook, that if you're not aware of them as a director, you might not ask for them. So to him it was like, the further we went with editing Cold Bird, he was like, oh, now I know I can ask about this, I can ask you to do this because I know it's possible, right? So yeah, there is this aspect as well.
Yeah, the whole world of filmmaking and options opens up once you have an understanding of what is possible and what can be seen and done. It's interesting. It's something that we learn every day, for sure.
Yeah, and the analogy that I used before on the podcast, so I will just reuse it again, is that editing is a form of writing. It's a form of storytelling, and like hundreds of years ago, very few people knew how to write. 20 years ago, very few people knew how to edit. These days, everyone knows how to write, and more people know how to edit because it's a storytelling tool. It's a storytelling tool, and we are storytelling creatures. People are storytelling creatures. So I think it's inevitable that like more and more people will be getting into editing, and it definitely informs other areas of this craft. That's for sure. And with that, Ricky, I'd like to congratulate you on your new reward. Do you want to talk about this award? Award. You've been awarded, rewarded, awarded.
That's right. The holding these moments won best editing at the Palma Film Festival in Mallorca. So I just got a message earlier last week about it. So yeah, feels pretty good.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. I shared it with my wife, and she's like, "You're the best editor ever," and I was like, "Thanks." So yeah, it feels good. Those accolades feel good for sure. But yeah, thank you very much for that.
Awesome. I just learned yesterday, if we're talking about this, that I'm just gonna mention that I've learned yesterday that lead of Yellow Ticket, my lead actor, Renee Zeger, won the Best Actor award at a festival in Germany, actually.
Oh, very
So
cool.
yeah, and I think he deserves it. So I'm very, very
Yeah,
happy.
he's very
And
good.
I haven't told him about this yet. So I'm just gonna once we wrap the recording, I'm gonna record him a message as well. Yeah, he's gonna be stoked.
That's awesome.
So, what movies have you seen? Like, let's pick one movie that you've seen just recently.
My wife hadn't seen Furiosa, so we watched Furiosa. That's the last movie that we saw.
Have you seen it for the second time, or?
This is the second time that I've seen it. I saw it in the theater and then we watched it together. It's okay. I think that there are some story things that are a little bit weird. It's different compared to Fury Road because Fury Road is kind of nonstop. And I think the pacing in Furiosa is much slower. There's like you've got your action pieces and whatever, and it's cool. But I think that like the pacing of it is kind of middle of the road the entire time for me. And then there were some holes in the story that I was like, well, why is this? Or why are we seeing this? And whatnot that were kind of annoying. So I thought it was okay. And my wife also thought that it was just okay. So
Okay.
anyway, what have you seen?
So yesterday I've watched Porco Rosso. Have you heard about Porco Rosso?
No, I don't think so.
Porco Rosso is a 1992 animation from Hayao Miyazaki. So the director of My Neighbor Totoro, Spirited Away, stuff like that, right? So like I love his films, and that's the one that I haven't seen yet. And wow, it's very good. I like it. I think it was surprising to me that it's the action is not happening in Japan. It's happening in Italy, and like the characters are Italian. And so on. So like it was surprising for some reason. I don't know why it was surprising to me, but it was. And it was set in like 1930s, I think, in like in between wars, and you get a sense of like fascism happening in Italy at that time and so on. So he touches on those aspects that are like historical as well. And the main character is like he's a pig.
Yeah,
He's a
yeah.
pig, right? In a like is the only character that is an animal in the film, which is like also different from his other films where you have characters that are animals. In this one, he's the only one. He's the only one, and people like say to him like, "Why have you become a pig?" and stuff like that. And it's kind of a mystery over there. And and the funny thing is that like he's a handsome pig. He's a pig that like that like people admire, and like other males like envy him and his skills, and he's very charismatic. So it's like I don't know. I think it was very interesting, and especially having seen The Wind Rises, the animation by Hayao Miyazaki as well. Like I can see that like Porco Rosso in a way is like The Wind Rises version one or something like that, because like
Okay.
I mean, from that point of view of like understanding how this guy loves aviation, because like the Porco Rosso, the main character,
Right, he's a pilot.
he's a pilot. Yeah, he's a pilot, and he's a good one. And yeah, there is a lot of like flying scenes and stuff like that. Good stuff. Good stuff. If you like Hayao Miyazaki, I strongly encourage you to watch it.
That's one that I haven't seen yet, but yeah. It's interesting that a lot of his films, though half of them may be set in Japan, but other ones are very, I want to say Bavarian, but they have that look, the more European look than they are a Japanese look, like where the people are living in the towns that they're in. Like in Howl's Moving Castle. Like a
Hmm.
lot of the landscapes and a lot of the villages and whatever that people are living in look very Bavarian and very like alpine. So it's interesting.
I'm actually curious. I will have to check his biography, but I'm pretty sure he must have spent a lot of time in Europe.
Possibly.
Maybe I'm very mistaken. I don't know, but it feels this way. It feels this way. Maybe not a lot of time, but it feels this way as he had like a European moment in his life at some point.
Yeah, it's possible.
Maybe I'm wrong, though. I don't know. If you, dear listener, know and like to teach us about this, then Ricky, do the contact thing and so on.
Yeah, you can always reach out to us and send us messages by email or through our social media sites, whatever. So if you want to send us an email, it's podcast@cuttothepoint.com. You can leave us a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/CTR. As always, we have an Instagram at Cut to Reveal. That's all lowercase, Cut to Reveal, one word. And then our YouTube channel. So youtube.com/@Cut to Reveal. And hopefully you can leave comments on that and whatever. As I've said before, I'm the one that does the Instagram account. So if you reach out with messages or whatever, I'll respond to you for sure. So yeah, if you have anything that you want to tell us or how we can improve the show, ideas, or who you want to hear us interview, these are all ways that you can reach out to us. So we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, and that's it for today. So thank you for that. Thank you for the conversation, Ricky. And till the next time, everyone is gonna be back for sure. Next time,
hopefully.
I think.
Yes,
almost for sure. Yeah.
Fingers crossed. All right, next time. Take care, everybody.